was at a friend's house on the new year of 1999, and she has a giant picture window in her dining room. I was spending the night, and we were the only ones awake. Her parents were asleep in their room, pretty much right next to us, and her brother and sister were asleep on the floor in the living room. We went over to the picture window to try and see the fireworks. We were trying to see them when we heard a clatter right above us. We looked up at the ceiling while hoping it was only rats. We ignored it and continued searching for the sky for fireworks. After about a minute, we heard heavy footsteps. They were horrible. After that night, she still comes to me with outrageous stories from the night before. One of them was not too long ago. She told me that she heard a voice one night while she was having trouble sleeping. She walked out of her room, looked down the stairs, and saw a dark figure standing at the end of the stairs. She thought it was her mom and started saying something to her, but it wasn't her mom. Not at all. She looked down the stairs closer, and then it opened its eyes. She says they were a bright glowing green. When she told me this, a bolt of pure, unspeakable terror shot down my spine. She also says that after she claimed she was in her room and she looked out her window, she saw in her little sister's room a blood red man looking right at her. She always has terrifying stories, and yet she is never scared or fazed by them herself. I remember in the 3rd grade, I was at her house every morning because I had seen strange figures in my hallway. Every morning, my mom would take me in, and I'd lay on the couch. As I watched her headlights dance across the wall and then disappear, the room would lower to an agonizing freezing cold. I guess I could chalk that up to coincidence, but knowing all the experiences I had previously and the ones that I just mentioned, I kinda doubt that. But I know that there is a presence in my house. Thanks for reading. My name is Ian, and I recently just spent 2 weeks in Italy. I live in LA, and was told of the many must-see locations in the area of Tuscany, but the one that most appealed to me was the Torture Museum in the famous city of San Gimignano. On the 9th and last day in Tuscany, before I took my long drive home to Rome, we decided to stop in San Gimignano. My father told me to leave me in the Torture Museum, aka the Criminal Museum, while he went off with my sisters. The Criminal Museum was originally a torture chamber, built during the time of the Spanish and Italian Inquisition. I bought my ticket at around 5:30 p.m. and proceeded to the bottom part of the torture chamber. As I entered the deepest part of the chamber, I got really scared. I was all alone, except for a German man and his children. The chamber was quite odd, and in some places, it was really cold, and I would go back to that same place, and it would not be cold anymore. Light gusts of wind would come out of nowhere, and there were no windows, doors, and it was underground. I began proceeding through the chamber, until I was stopped by a ghostly figure, standing right behind an Iron Maiden. It was a shade of white that I'd never seen before. I could barely make it out, but there were depressions where the mouth, eyes, and nose were. I stood frozen for what felt like 10 minutes. It then darted straight across the room, in the direction of the opposite wall. I could even hear its feet going across the floor. I ran like a bat out of hell, and nearly cleared 20 stairs, but fell and slid down the 10 other. I later spoke to the man in the reception room. He asked me where I saw it, and I said in the chamber. He told me that there are hundreds of ghosts in there, and many seem to be insane. I will never forget what happened to me in Italy, and I hope others will enjoy my story. My name is Julie, and I'm 32, mother of a wonderful 4-year-old son, which I would give my life for, married to a wonderful, incredible man. We live in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. When I was about 8, I believe, I had my first terrifying experience with the dead. My great-grandma had passed away a few days earlier, although I can't really recall the event all that well. One night, a few days after her death, I woke up in the middle of the night, needing to go to the bathroom. The bathroom was just in front of my bedroom. separated by a long hallway that went basically across the part of the first and only floor. Beside my bedroom was my parents' bedroom. My bedroom to the bathroom was only like 3 feet to walk across the hallway. As I walked towards the bathroom, for some reason, I looked into my parents' bedroom. What I saw terrified me. Across my parents' bed, I saw my great-grandma lying on her side, holding her head with her left arm looking at me with these black, see-through eyes. I will never forget. Very young and innocent, I didn't really ever think that ghosts really existed. That made me aware of another world that we were not taught about in our upbringing. When I got a little older, we had bought a house in Hawkesbury, Ontario, that we stayed into for I would say 5 to 6 years. I was about 16 at the time. We had just purchased the house, and while my father was renovating the upstairs, the whole family would be sleeping in the basement. One night, as we were spending a little time together, we heard this funny noise upstairs. We thought someone, for some reason, had entered our home, so my father went up to see what was going on. To all of our surprise, all 4 rings of our ceiling light had just fallen on the floor. Not one at a time, but all 4. We could hear footsteps in the house, and when I was alone, the front doorknob would turn, and nobody was even there. I was so terrified. I did not know what to make of these events. At night, I would hear someone open the fridge door and close, open pantry doors and close loud. I would constantly feel a presence. I would barely have any sleep in the house. Sometimes, I would go and sleep with my brother. It is a terrible feeling as a child to be afraid like this. It's not okay. I don't think in any way that this is a funny thing. When you're a child, you get confused and don't understand the logic of these things. Actually, because there is no logic. When I got older in my early 20s, my grandmother passed away. God, I adored her. She was my best friend, and to this day, I miss her like crazy. Not long after she had died, maybe a few nights after, she appeared to me while sitting on the side of my bed, late one night. She appeared right next to me. She had her arm around my neck, and she looked at me saying, "Julie, don't be sad. You know that I'm not really gone." And she disappeared into thin air. I felt such a relief that she felt my sadness, and that she loved me enough to come and comfort me. I will never forget that precious moment. For you, Grandma, I love you. Julie. To start my story, my father and I pretty much had a decent relationship most of my life. Of course, when I was a teenager, I did the usual teenage crap and rebelled, and we grew apart. I had moved out and ended up with an abusive boyfriend. I ended up moving back home, and Dad and I renewed our relationship. Those 9 months before my dad's death were great. We actually got a chance to really talk, and I think my dad knew his time was short. He kept telling me that I would find the right guy eventually, and I would make a good mom someday. On February 11th, 1997, Dad passed away after a long illness that we would discover later was periodontitis. Things didn't start happening right away. It started after I met the man who would be my husband later, and I became pregnant with our son. About 4 months into my pregnancy, we started noticing little things around the house, mostly having to do with noises and objects that belonged to my father. After my son was born, and he was about a month old, my husband and I were watching television in the living room, and the baby was asleep. My mother's room, we were staying with her, due to after Dad died, she couldn't pay the bills on her own, was right off the living room. She had went to bed, and after about a half hour, she said she had seen a white orb about the size of a softball traveling between the bedroom door and her vanity mirror. No light source constant. Her room was pitch black because she kept tinfoil and trash bags over her windows to keep the light out. Then, when we were getting things ready for the wedding, it seemed like all hell broke loose. Objects being thrown, kitchen drawers opening and shutting by themselves, strange noises. You name it, we had it. Then, the wedding day came. I wasn't nervous, because I knew Dad was there. I wore his turquoise ring I gave him for a Father's Day present, for something blue. Everyone at the wedding and the reception said they could feel him. Even some of the pictures taken at the reception were questionable. A couple have what appears to have a mist in them. My son is in most of those photographs. Then we didn't really have anything happen for a while, until my son started getting old enough to talk. Then in the evening, when only me and my son were at home, watching TV most times, he would get all excited, as if someone had just come home. He would run up to the baby gate, wave, and yell hi, and I would go up to the gate and look down the hall to see no one there, and I would ask him, "Who are you talking to?" And he'll look up at me and smile and say, "Grandpa, Mama." He never met my father. My son was born on 2100, and Dad died on 2/11/97. After he did this for a couple of weeks, I invested in an EMF detector. After running a few test runs to get readings from the hallway on basic electrical outlets and whatnot, I waited for my son to say hi to Dad again. Sure enough, about a week later, it happened again. This time I ran into the hallway to see if I could get a reading. I did. A perfect circle about 2 feet in diameter, smack dab in the middle of the hallway. I knew it was Dad. We have since moved, but my son still says hi on occasion to Grandpa, and my sister and I can still sense his presence. I'm 19 now, and most of my experiences have happened recently, although I remember a few from when I was a child. I'm a student at a Big Ten university and stayed in the dorms my first year here. My roommate and I were soon to find out we had another roommate. One night, I was dreaming that I was lying in a bed across from another bed, and a girl was pacing in between. Well, my dream soon faded to reality when I noticed myself blinking. We had lofts, so the floor that was in my dream was now gone, but the girl was still pacing, about 5 feet in the air. I don't know what came over me, and I didn't mean to say anything, but I blurted out, "What are you looking for?" The girl stopped and looked at me. Her eyes were just dark holes, and then faded away. I wasn't scared of her. I just went back to sleep. During other nights, I would be startled awake by what sounded like heavy books being thrown to the floor, and in the morning, nothing would be out of place. Things would go missing, only to end up in the middle of the floor days later. My first touching experience took place there also. I was taking a nap on the futon with my boyfriend when I felt what I thought was my boyfriend's scruffy chin rub on my forehead. It woke me, but I didn't open my eyes. It happened again, and so I thought he was trying to get my attention. I looked up, expecting to see his face, and there was nothing there. He was about 2 feet away from me, with his back towards me, fast asleep. My roommate, however, had the creepiest experience. She rarely had any, but hers, I think, didn't happen to me. She came in the room from the shower, down the hall, and went to her mirror. When she noticed she had a drop of blood on the tip of her nose, she wiped it off onto her finger, expecting to see a pop zit or something, but her nose was clear. She showed me the blood on her finger and told me what happened, so we checked her arms and legs, everywhere, to see if she had cut herself shaving. We checked her towel, robe, slippers, everything, and there was no blood anywhere else. We still do not know where it came from. Last night was my most recent experience, which made me want to read about stories online. It was at my parents' home, which we all think is haunted by some man. I was ready to fall asleep when I was startled awake by a loud pop in front of my face. Minutes later, I heard dripping water. That ghost mostly bothers my brother, whose bedroom is in the basement, where most of the activity takes place. I would like to share my experiences with someone who doesn't think I'm crazy. When I was 5 years old, my mom, dad, and I moved to a house in Crownsville. It was about 7 years old and had originally been built as a summer home only. My dad did a lot to the house over the years to renovate it. When I was about 10 years old, He finished the new bedroom on the front of the house, and he and my mother moved in. I got their old bedroom at the back of the house. I'm not sure if this bedroom was on the house originally, because it was built on a concrete slab, and the rest of the house was over a basement. My mother claimed to see a ghost materialize from the heating vent into the room. We all laughed it off. Later on, I didn't think it was so funny anymore. My parents were very strict and didn't leave me alone in the house until I was 13. After they left, I was really creeped out by the feeling in the house. I felt as though I was being watched. I wandered into the kitchen and heard a really weird sound. Then I noticed that the cupboard doors were moving. It looked like they were vibrating. I recognized the noise. It's the glass that's in the cabinets, all vibrating against one another. I ran back to my room and stayed there till my parents got back. One time, I got this brilliant idea to bring a Ouija board into the house. My grandmother had lots of junk in her backyard, and as I dug around, I had found the board wedged between two small buildings. If I'd been a bit older and a bit smarter, I would have left the damn thing there. I shoved it into the back floorboard of my mother's car, underneath my jacket. Somehow, I snuck it inside later on, without being seen. It was just a board in the planches, the Parker Brothers kind. I put it in my underwear drawer, all the way at the bottom, hoping to play with it later. I had failed school that year, so I had to go to summer school. I knew I would have to get up early, so I went to bed early. I was wakened sometime later, after my parents went to bed. I thought I heard a rattling. I listened for several minutes, heard nothing, and went back to sleep. I woke up again, a little while later. Again, I thought I heard rattling, and this time, I thought it had come from my dresser. I was slightly freaked out, but I heard nothing after a few intense minutes of listening, so I rolled over and went back to sleep. I woke up a third time. This time, I was angry. I still heard it when I woke all the way up, so I hurried and turned my light on. I saw the dresser drawer move for a few seconds, then it stopped. There was no more sleep for me to be had that night. The light stayed on, and I stayed sitting up in my bed till dawn. Then I got into the dresser, snapped the board in pieces, and threw it out my back window. The last thing that happened, while I lived in the house, occurred when my best friend stayed the night. We were supposed to be sleeping in my bed, but being kids, we were up talking. We both shut up at once and looked out my bedroom door. It was the kind of house where all the doors line up. I could look out of my door and see clear to my parents' bedroom door. In between were my old room, the kitchen, and the living room. We both saw glowing orbs floating around in the living room. There were about 5 of them, and they were way brighter than any of the lamps we had. She and I stared in awe for a few minutes, and then they faded away. She and I are still friends, but we never have talked about the glowing balls floating around my living room. Thanks for listening. I have been able to explain what happened the night of the Ouija board rattlings. For all I know, it could be the workings of an overactive imagination, but it sure seemed to be real to me. The terror of that night never has faded. Hi. I've owned this large, 3-story, late 1800s building for the past 25 years or so. The first floor has 2 storefronts, and the second and third originally had 3 apartments per floor. I converted 2 of the second floor apartments into one large apartment for myself. When I first bought the building, I had a great deal of work to do on it. My mother would occasionally visit, and she would ask me who was in the back room of the main store. There was no one there, but she would insist. I never thought much about this until later in life. She now sees non-existent people nearly everywhere. Sometime after gutting the building and making it partly usable, I was working on the first floor and saw a young boy running through the store. Since the place was locked up tight, and there were 7 alarm systems, and only one was off, it was impossible for the child to hide from me. No child was to be found. Over the years, I, and many others, have seen a child running through the store. I've seen the occasional person while looking in a mirror, although this doesn't happen often. Many years ago, My friend Scott shared the apartment and had a rear bedroom of his own. One evening, he came out to see me when I got home and complained that something had sexually assaulted him. He found the event very painful. I somewhat dismissed this as folly on his part, but never forgot it. A few years later, I rented that same room to another fellow, and he had a similar experience. He moved out the next day. I rented a room to a fellow who was gay. He never had problems until his friend came over to visit. They were alone in the bed at the time. They were in the bedroom when the bed lifted a few inches off the floor and fell down. Then the bed moved a couple of feet from its location. Finally, the tenant had a set of barbells sitting on the floor. They were tossed up in the air several times, hitting the floor with a bang. After this happened, I began to read up on getting rid of spirits in the building. I placed a pentagram with proper symbols in the room above the tenant's room and went through the ceremony. From that day forward, nothing else happened in the building. That is, until the roof leaked above the room, and I bought up a tarp and bucket to catch the leak. The tarp covered the pentagram. Since then, people, including myself, see things in the building, mostly visions of people. Some people leave the building immediately when this happens. Over the years, nothing has ever happened to me physically, and my sightings of spirits are rare. I'd like to mention another place in Buffalo. It is on West Avenue, near Ferry. The location was originally Buffalo's hanging grounds, and now there are houses on it. My friend Paul owns the house. Occasionally, when no one is in the house, there will be loud screams coming from inside the house. Police have been summoned by neighbors on several occasions, but couldn't find anything out. Thanks for reading. I had a couple of strange experiences at a cemetery in Vancouver as a teenager, about 15 years ago or so. Everyone I've told the story to over the years seems to get a chill run down their necks from hearing it, so I thought it would make a good addition to your website, which I enjoy reading through on occasion, as I'm interested in hearing about other people's experiences with the unexplained. Back in the late 80s, I hung around with a group of friends who I'd hang around with and mostly get into trouble with. I guess looking back, we didn't really have any beliefs or interest in the supernatural or spirituality, and I suppose we were kind of like teenage nihilists in a way, getting into trouble with the police and partying a lot, not conscientious about school or the future. So what would happen at the cemetery would all seem the more strange. Well, anyways, one school night, we were out looking for something to do at around 10 or 11 at night, and we couldn't really think of anything as it was midweek, and most people our age only went out on the weekends. We ended up just driving around with no destination in mind, and at one point, someone suggested we go to a local cemetery, just because we had nowhere else to go. This cemetery is cut into the forest on the side of a mountain, and is basically just a giant field surrounded by trees, and all the headstones are just flat plates on the ground, so that if you didn't know it was a cemetery, it would just appear as a big empty field upon entering it. The point is that there's absolutely nothing to obstruct your view or cast strange shadows in the cemetery. To get into the cemetery, you have to drive through a 40-meter winding road that runs through trees and bushes, etc. And this road eventually branches out so that cars can access different parts of the cemetery. There were 3 of us in the car, with myself driving, a friend in the front seat and one in the back. As I pulled the car into the small entrance road, I slowed the car right down and put on the high beams and drove the car at a snail's pace towards the cemetery. As we made the last little bend in the road and entered the cemetery, the high beam suddenly illuminated the entire field, and it was at this point that I suddenly and violently jammed my foot on the brakes, because about 15 meters in front of us stood a group of about 30 to 40 people. I think I recall my friend sitting next to me, saying something to the effect of, "What the hell is going on here?" I don't know. I answered maybe some kind of midnight burial or something, and then cracking some joke that maybe they were druids. I remember my friend, in the back seat, suggesting that we back the car the way we came in, so as not to disturb whatever was going on. which I declined doing, saying it would be a better idea to make the first turn and come around as it's a narrow road. At this time, probably about 20 to 30 seconds might have passed, and I took my foot off the brake and we proceeded forward. After the car had moved forward, maybe 15 feet, and I was staring intently at the group of the people the whole time, there strangely now seemed to be less of them, which confused me. Although I remember slight movement within the group, they didn't seem to be bothered by the headlights, and I don't recall any of them looking directly at us. Well, by the time the car had reached about half the distance to where they were standing, and this is the odd part, there was no one left standing there, just an empty field, and it was at this point, when I hit the brakes again, I can remember the intense feeling of my scalp feeling like it was covered in goosebumps and shrinking, because it was only at this point that it clicked into my mind that something ghostly and unnatural had occurred. I drove the car up to a spot alongside where the group was standing and rolled down the window to have a closer look, but there was no explanation for what we had seen. At this point, someone suggested that we get the heck out of there, and we did, quickly. I can think of no possible explanation for what happened, and even went up there a couple weeks later with the same car, but a different friend, to see if maybe we could duplicate the feat and try to come up with some explanation, but we were unsuccessful. Strange thing was that all three of us saw the same thing from different vantage points, and there was nothing that the headlights could have refracted off to cause an illusion against the windshield. And anyways, the groups were clearly standing at a distance of 50 or so meters in three-dimensional space, so there's no way it could have been a reflection. When I tried to duplicate the experience in the same car, nothing happened. I suppose it was this experience that has caused me to have a belief in a greater reality than we see in our everyday lives. Something else happened at that cemetery months later, not quite as strange, but strange nonetheless. But this email has turned out longer than I intended it to, so perhaps I'll submit it another time. I've had a family member who was buried at that cemetery since that time, and the experience has helped me to believe that perhaps some of them is still with us in some way. I would like to share the experience we've had, my husband and I, with the ghost of a dead boy. We had some pretty scary moments. A few years ago, we moved into our new home. An old lady had lived there for years and had passed away 2 years before shortly after she moved into an old people's home. The house had been left empty since she moved out. We were the first ones to move in. It was the beginning of springtime, so it was a little cold inside. As we turned on the central heating system, we heard a noise as if a kettle was whistling. We thought it was just a little dry, as it had not been used in the last 2 years. This was just the beginning. When you entered our house, you would see a hallway surrounded by the living room, bathroom, bedrooms, and closet with the central heating system inside. As time passed away, we did not take any notice of the heating system making noise. I must say, I felt kinda awkward when I passed a particular closet. Next thing happened was on our clock. The pendulum would stop at different times. I would give it a swing, and it would keep going for days. It happened many times, and looking back on it, our cats were always looking at things we weren't able to see, especially into the direction of the clock. Then our candles. We used to burn them every night, at 2 places in our living room. We never had any problems with drafts, but suddenly, we noticed our candles were burning unsteadily. All these things happened in our living room, and we never thought anything of it, until one evening, the pendulum stopped, the candle started flickering, and a cold chill went through the room. The temperature dropped instantly, and suddenly, the noise from the central heating system didn't sound like a whistling kettle anymore, but like a stream drain running right through our living room. We looked at the TV, and suddenly, we saw the display changing numbers, and the screen turned to snow. It looked like it was trying to find a channel to display something we did not want to see. My husband rushed to the thermostat to turn it down, so the central heating would stop making noise. The TV went back to the channel we had been watching before, and everything went back to normal. Except for the 2 of us, we were scared to death, and we realized that something was haunting us. As we thought back at all the times the pendulum stopped, the noises from the central heating, the uncomfortable feeling we got from that closet and the candles, something or someone was trying to scare us out of our home. I told my husband that it was time to take some action, or things could get worse. As we decided to go to bed, the central heating started whistling again, and as I passed the closet, I yelled at it, "Stop it, and shut up!" Believe it or not, it did stop. Relieved as I was, I rushed into the bedroom to find the halogen lamp flickering heavily, and the whistling started again. I decided to take a run through the hallway, back into the living room, to turn the thermostat off, so the noise would stop. My husband was too scared to get out of bed, and I'll tell you, I wasn't happy either, but I managed to do so, and I was glad to return to bed, hiding under the sheets. The next day, I decided to call a psychic called Jan, who's well known for leading ghosts into another dimension, with the help of his guide, Layla. Through Layla, he was told that a young man in his early 20s had been living here before we moved in. He had died, jumping or falling off a bridge in Rotterdam. We were never told his name, so we could not do any research on this guy. Layla led him into the light, and all went quiet and peaceful. We moved out of the house a few years later, and we're glad we never encountered anything like this again. It still gives me the creeps just thinking about it. Kind regards, and good luck with your website. I'm not sure if you'll understand my English, since it's been a while since I studied it, so if you have any questions, let me know. It happened when I was in my early teens. I think first, I should describe my room to you. It's the very smallest room in the whole apartment. The bed was placed facing the door, and the piano was on the left side of the door. That day, my sister was sleeping in the room, on the floor. I don't know exactly what time this incident happened. All I know is that it was scary. So, I woke up in the middle of the night, opened my eyes to see a Grim Reaper with a scythe just standing there. His face was hidden under the hood, but the face under the hood was glaring with a very weird greenish light. My body was paralyzed. The only parts of my body I still had control over were my eyes. Suddenly, he started laughing, but it was a silent laugh. The most unusual thing about this, though, was that I could still hear him laughing, even though it was silent. His laugh would be best described as something evil and demonic. It was just cruel. I closed my eyes because I couldn't look at it any longer, and if I did, my heart would have jumped out of my mouth. When I opened my eyes, he was gone. I could still hear his laugh. It's weird that I fell asleep after that. After this incident, strange things started happening to me. I'd wake up in the middle of the night with my body stiff and be afraid of nothing, even if I was alone in the room. Or I'd feel like something's trying to touch me. Having dreams about people I don't know, and they always tell me that they're dead. This happened some 7 years ago, in 1996. The office building where I worked then used to be a hotel. I was told there were 2 ghosts in the building. One, on the 7th floor, was supposed to be the ghost of a murdered hotel maid, but no one could tell where or what the second one was supposed to be. I shared an office on the corner of the 3rd floor, and my colleague and I would often look up from our work, expecting to see someone, but there was never anyone there. We both felt that someone had walked through the office door, which we kept open for ventilation. An old office building such as this one did not have air conditioning. We talked about this and discovered that we each had this experience on several occasions. Sometimes we were alone, sometimes when we were both in the office. We eventually decided that we must be hearing someone walk along the corridor past the office, and after this, our imaginary visitor did not make their presence felt nearly so often. Then one morning, as I came back from the small area known as the tea bay after making myself a coffee, I distinctly saw a man enter our office doorway. When I followed a few seconds later, there was only my colleague there. He insisted that no one had come through the door, and he said I must have been seeing someone going around the corner. I maintained that I had distinctly seen someone in the light coming from our doorway, and that the corridor beyond our office was dark at that time because the lighting was being replaced. A few weeks later, I saw the same man going into the tea bay, which is no more than an alcove with a water heater, refrigerator, and cleaning facilities, and when I got there, it was empty. There was no way he could have come out again without passing me. There was no other exit. I told my colleagues, and they said I must have seen someone going into either the men's or the women's toilets, which are on either side of the tea bay. I maintain that I saw someone going into the tea bay. If they had gone into the toilets, I would have heard the doors closing. There are none on the tea bay. Hello there. I've never thought of myself as being sensitive to paranormal things, but I've had too many experiences that I cannot explain easily. I would like to take this time and share two memorable experiences with you. Mind you, most of my experiences were feelings of not being alone, hairs of my neck rising, feelings of being watched, getting overwhelmed with sadness, hatred, and anger suddenly. I'm going to start off with my brush with the Martin House, listed in the Haunted Places Index under Panama City, Florida, at the age of 8 years. In 1978, it was owned by the paper mill company that was located across the street from the house. The Martin House sat on a huge amount of land and was surrounded by trees with moss hanging from them. There was a waterway running past the right of the house, looking at the front porch. The paper mill would rent this house out to various groups for parties. At the time, my father was in the Air Force, and his maintenance group rented out the house several times. I kind of felt safe on the lower floor and around the house grounds. I always made sure that my sister, 7 years old and I, stayed with a group of people at all times. For the most part, kids were running all over the lower section of the house, and we had plenty of places to explore. We were told from the beginning not to go upstairs because it was not safe. A group of us, me included, decided to explore the upstairs area after we ate some food. I led the way up after the first 5 steps and stopped. I was looking at the top of the stairs and had the feeling of being watched by someone very bad. I let the boy behind me go first. We all started up the stairs and I stopped again, feeling very uneasy. Couldn't seem to catch my breath. I was pushed out of the way by the other kids who went up the stairs. I went back down a ways until I was in the light that was shining from below and waited there still uneasy. Then the kids started to scream and came running down the stairs with me in front and told their parents that a very scary man was staring at them. Our parents went up to look around and could not find anyone. We all got punished. Each time we went to find that house, I was always looking up at one set of windows overlooking the waterway. I felt like I was being watched by something. Last, the ankle grabber. I was 23 years old and visiting my sister in Marietta, Georgia. She lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. The 2 bedrooms were located on the left side of the hallway, with the bathroom right across the room. I would be staying in with my mom. This room had a faint, nasty odor that got stronger towards the closet. My first 2 nights there in the room, I felt uneasy, like I was being watched, and fell asleep watching the closet door. I had a restless sleep, and I always woke up looking at the closet door. The 3rd day, I helped my sister get some extra boxes put away in the closet. It smelled like rotting flesh. It was extremely cold and unpleasant being in there. My sister said that she had tried everything to get the smell out, but nothing worked. That night, my mom decided to sleep out in the living room. I fell asleep the same way, eyes on the closet. I suddenly woke up to the feeling of someone rubbing their thumb down the length of my right foot very hard. It then went into spasms. I looked around the bed, thinking it might have been my sister. Nothing, but that closet door was slightly opened, and it was not how I left it before I went to bed. I wasn't able to go to bed the rest of the night. and my daughter slept soundly. The next day was uneventful, except when my daughter was taking a nap. Strange sounds were coming from her baby monitor. I went down the hallway with a feeling of dread and went into the room to look around. Nothing was out of place, and I even checked my daughter for marks. There were none, but I did take her out of the room to finish her nap in the living room. That night, I was hot and decided to sleep on top of the covers. Again, my mom slept in the living room. I placed my daughter's playpen in a safer part of the room. I slept in the middle of the bed, with my right hand on the middle of the pillow. I woke up in terror when my ankle was grabbed and I was jerked 6 inches off of my pillow. My right leg was hanging off the end of the bed and my left leg was bent. I got up, picked up my daughter, and went to sleep in the living room. In the morning, I asked my mom about any unusual experiences in that room. She said she didn't have anything funny happen to her. Just then, my sister let me know that her former roommate had complained of hearing footsteps in the room when no one else was in there. The room, by the way, was carpeted. Unusual sounds, bad smells, and being watched. I asked my sister to move out of her apartment. My daughter and I spent the rest of the visit sleeping in the living room. On the last day, I went into the room, threatened if it ever hurt my family members, I would be its worst nightmare when I died, and called it every dirty name in the book. I figured I'd take my chances and say it anyway, even if I sound ridiculous and yell at nothing. I would like to thank you for your time, and thank you most of all for allowing me to share my experiences with you. I know the paranormal can bring a lot of skepticism into this world, but I also know there are things you just can't explain. I believe in the paranormal. I believe in the things that go bump in the night, and I certainly won't dismiss something just because someone thinks it's something crazy that may not be existing. Keep an open mind. Don't be so dismissive, because you never know when something may lurk on you, and you never know when you're being watched. Here's kind of a creepy story. I go to school at Lalu, and my school, mind you, it is a private school. There have been a few suicides and drownings. We are on a lake, and other things such like that. Well, many students here have seen the Lalu ghost, and apparently, we have more than one haunting. One of my friend's sisters was being followed around by it. At one part of the school, there are wooden steps, which makes lots of noise when you walk down them. She started to walk down them, and she heard loud footsteps behind her. She stopped. It stopped. She looked around. No one was there. So, she kept going, and the footsteps kept going. That, from what I heard, was the last time I know that the ghost had been sighted, until 2 weeks ago. It was a late Thursday afternoon when my friends Kai, Clover, and Jess walked down to the Pine Room, which is basically our storage room in Lost and Found, to get a binder or something. When they went down there, Clover had started to feel a presence. Kai saw a flicker of light, and Jess saw the entire figure of what she could only explain as a ball of white light. All three of them just got what they needed and left, talking about this ghost. This is how I found out. I overheard them talking, and so did my friend, Jake. Jake is the most skeptical person I've ever met in my entire life. He doesn't even believe in luck. I had told Jake about this, and he basically laughed, and we went to go see Kai, who seems to be the resident expert on the occult here at Lalu, and find out what happened. Dave, who is also a skeptic, was laughing at her for saying this, and wanted to see it himself. Kai told all three of us not to go down there. It'll just make him mad, and I trusted her, mainly because I believe in ghosts and the supernatural, and everything like that, and I stayed. Where Jake and Dave went down to the Pine Room to try to see it. They came back empty-handed, and laughing. We talked a little bit more about the ghost, and what it could potentially do to you if it was mad enough. Then, Jake and Adder decided to try again. By this time, about 10 other people found out and wanted to see it too. Everyone went down, and everyone heard a loud bang, but nothing else. Then everyone went back up, but for some reason, Jake was called back downstairs. He was just inside of the door when he saw this ball of light pass in front of him to the adjacent corner. Scared, he ran as fast as he could back up to where me and Kai were waiting. He told us of this story, and David overheard as well. So, being the idiot that he is, Dave went back down there and, yet again, didn't see anyone or anything. Dave then went to go see Clover, who was waiting in the stairwell down the hall to where we were at. We started to follow, slower than him, and about halfway, we all had the same feeling as Dave Giuliano did in his story. The hairs on our arms sticking up, and an uncomfortable constant shiver. At that time, in unison, we all asked, "Did you feel that?" Then, the creepiest thing happened to me. A feeling of soft, very, very soft hands, almost like wind, only solid, ran across my arm. And later, I found out that every time that Jake had walked by that spot and that feeling happened, his legs started cramping up. We went to the stairwell and we talked with the two. Kai was shouting at Dave because it was challenging the ghost to its face, and then she moved over a little, and both me and Jake saw it. We didn't see anything, really, but we knew it was there in its exact movements. Move over from the exact spot she was standing, right over to where Dave was squatting, and, after David challenged the ghost again, we left. After all this, I found out from Kai that it was a different ghost, and that when Dave challenged it, she had saw it laughing. Within 2 days of this sighting, my friends Ben and Jamie were playing with the camera to use up the film, which only had 3 pictures left, and it was disposable. Ben's had looked through the viewfinder and saw a ball of light behind Jamie and took the picture. They developed the film, and it was caught on film. Hi, I'm from Ireland, and I haven't seen many stories from here. Well, my experience started in 1997. I was 15 when we moved to the house. We moved to a little village in Wexford. Our new house is over 150 years old, but has been done up and looks modern. Anyway, about 2 weeks after moving into our new house, I was trying to go to sleep one night when I heard someone calling the name Martin. I shared a room with my younger sister at the time, and she was fast asleep. I was wide awake, and whoever was calling the name called it about 5 or 6 times. The next day, when I woke up, I went down to my parents and asked who lived in the house before us. They told me don't be stupid, and that I know. Then, I asked who lived in the house before the people we bought the house off of, and I was told a man's name, called Jimmy Martin, and his wife. At first I thought this was a coincidence, and I never said what happened the night before. I soon started to feel someone was watching me all the time, especially in the sitting room. It is hard to explain, but even though I could not see anything, I could tell you there was an old lady standing in front of the sitting room door, and this is where she always stands. I was afraid to go to sleep some nights, as one night, when I was laying in my bed, something kept hitting me on the back of my head, as if to try and wake me up. Well, I was wide awake, but I was too scared to look, as I was afraid of what I could see. Another night, I was just dozing off, when someone decided to sit on the edge of my bed. This frightened the life out of me. I had kept all these experiences to myself, as I thought if I told anyone, they would think I was mad. I had an ensuite in my room, and one night, the toilet handle started going up and down by itself. Everything was getting to me, so after 3 years of keeping it all to myself, I started telling some of my friends what was happening to me. They thought it was scary, and asked me what my parents thought. They couldn't understand why I wouldn't tell them, but I just said they would think I'm mad. Anyway, more stuff started happening, but nothing serious. I went out for a few drinks with my mom and one of their friends, and when the night was over, we all came back to my house, and had a cup of tea and a chat. They got into the subjects of spirits and started talking about past experiences they had. I thought this would be a good opportunity for me to tell them about mine. I started with my sentence with, "You're going to think I'm mad, but," and then I started to cry. I told them everything that was happening to me, and to my surprise, they had their own experiences. My dad was sitting in the sitting room one night, reading the newspaper, when a woman started whispering his name and started running her fingers down through his hair. My mom has heard them walk around upstairs, and she could hear them call her name sometimes. And when she was in bed one night, it was like someone was blowing cold air into her ear. My brother woke me up one night because there was an argument going on in his room, and to his surprise, there was 5 spirits in his room, bickering at each other. His room is across from mine. My mom and dad were annoyed with me because I never told them what was happening to me. We have 2 bedrooms upstairs and 2 downstairs. Me and my sister used to share a room upstairs, but she has now moved out, and my brother, who has also slept upstairs, has moved out now, so I'm up there by myself, and some nights, I can feel there's someone there, and it would take me half the night to go to sleep, as I would be terrified, lying in my bed. I'm 21, and the eldest of 4 children. Now that my brother and one of my sisters have moved out, my little sister, 13, looks up to me and likes to do stuff together. She's often asked me about my experiences, which are still happening today, but I won't tell her too much, as it would frighten her. To end my story, I will tell you about a reading we held in our house. A man came to our house who could see spirits, and he gave about 10 of us our readings. I was first to get mine done, and as I sat down, the kitchen door opened. As I got up to shut it, the man told me to wait a minute. He then told me that he isn't now, and that I should shut the door. This sent a shiver down my spine. He told my mother how I can sense spirits, and how a bad spirit entered the room with me. He said that he got rid of him, but there's a spirit that follows me around, but it's a good spirit, and this is the one that I can sense around me all the time. He said that there are a few spirits in my house, but they're good, well except the bad one he got rid of. Well, that's my story, and it's going on today. The good news is, I've just learned to live with it, in the sleepless nights at times. Hopefully I'll be the next to move, because the terror drives me mad sometimes. Thank you. First off, I'm 19, and have believed in ghosts my entire life. Now, I don't have a sixth sense, but I find it fun to discuss ghosts and all sorts of unexplained occurrences. I'm a pretty athletic guy, and played football through high school, and am pretty strong too. I can bench 280. I'm not saying this to sound like I'm bragging, just to say I'm not afraid of that much, but what happened to me 2 summers ago left me pretty shaken. I was about 17 at the time, and had found out about a haunted church through my mother. She had gone when she was younger. Nothing happened, except she had a really weird feeling the whole time she was there. Well, finding ghosts fascinating, I wanted to go, but didn't want to go by myself, so I told my brother about it. We decided to go on a Saturday night. Maybe we'd have a story to tell at the parties. My brother at the time was 15, and he wanted to bring some friends along, so I agreed. Altogether there were the 5 of us, me, my brother, my brother's friend, and 2 girls they wanted to impress. The layout of the church goes like this. The church is in the middle of a field, surrounded by woods. All around the church in sort of a U pattern are graves. The graves start a little ahead of the church and meet in back, forming the U. There is no space between the graves and church for a few people to walk. In front of the church is a stone wall about 3 feet high and 2 sensor trigger lights on each side of the stone wall. We parked in a little dirt parking lot right in front of the church and got out. Me, being the oldest and assumed the bravest, went over the wall first. As soon as my feet hit the ground on the other side of the fence, I got a really bad feeling and my hair stood on end. The first thing we did was go up to the front steps and hang out for the first couple of minutes. The thing that struck me was that there was no noise at all inside the wall, no crickets or anything, which is strange because it's surrounded by woods. Once we got bored of sitting around, we decided to go around back. That's when the really weird stuff started to happen. We were walking in a straight line because none of the younger kids wanted to be last. It was me, my brother's friend, the two girls, and my brother. That was the order from left to right. We were walking so that I was closest to the grave, and my brother was closest to the church. About halfway down the length of the church, we all heard a whooshing sound. My brother's friend and I to the left, and my brother and the two girls to the right, like we were being surrounded. Everyone asked each other if they heard the sound, and we all answered yes. After that noise, Mike, my brother's friend, and the two girls wanted to leave, but my brother and I convinced them to stay. Not that I wasn't scared, I just wanted to see more. I forgot to mention that me and my brother both had flashlights, which gets important. As we made our way to the back of the church, we all heard a loud hum, kind of like electric wires, but no one were around. This sound kept getting louder. Also, this went on through the whole entire time we were there, and probably would have scared us enough, if not for what happened next. At about the same time, I heard a noise. I saw a black ink blot, like shape move from a grave to behind a bush. I tried to follow it with a flashlight, but it was too fast. However, Mike saw it move from that same bush to behind another tree. From that point, we would hear sounds and directions all around us, and when my flashlight or my brother's was aimed at the spot we heard the sound, we would just get a glimpse of a shape going back the way the light came to, too fast for us to follow it. Now, there had to be more than one of whatever they were, because as me and Mike were going through this on one side, my brother and the two girls were doing the same on the other side. All of a sudden, I heard my brother and the two girls scream. My brother is a pretty tough kid himself, and I never heard him scream like that in my entire life. Never mind the girls. When I turned to see what was wrong, the three were sprinting out of there at a very fast pace. When I heard them scream, I almost panicked, but got my nerves under control. Mike, however, took off like a world-class sprinter, leaving me by myself. Not wanting to be the only one there, I backpedaled as fast as I could, so I could see whatever it was, if it was coming after us. At this point, the humming was almost deafening, and that's when I got the impression that whatever was making the sound was coming closer at every very fast pace. At that same moment, my flashlight went dead, and then I did panic. I turned and ran faster than ever before in my life. When I reached the stone wall, I saw everyone else in the car waiting for me. I just jumped the stone wall. As soon as my feet landed, the flashlight went back on. The humming stopped, and I heard, guess what? Crickets chirping. Also, all the feelings of fear I had disappeared, and everything was calm. I got in the car and asked what my brother and the girls had seen. They said it was the body of a little girl floating inside the second-story window. At that time, the sensor lights went on, meaning something was coming towards the gate. Remembering the humming sound, I took off as fast as possible. There have been other stories about how people have seen the little girl, or heard her playing the flute, but none to the extent of ours. After this happened, I did a little research, and this is what I found. In the 70s, a man raped and murdered 5 young women, and buried them in the back of the graveyard, behind the church. I don't know where the little girl comes into the picture, but that is what everyone sees. Later, when I asked my brother why a little girl scared them so much, he said the face looked mad, like it wanted us out, and he just got a bad feeling when he saw it. This is the only ghostly experience, and hopefully the only bad one I'll ever have, and this story is 100% true. Hi, not sure if you are interested, but here's a couple of stories from the place I live in Tasmania, Australia. My boyfriend and I live in Daisy Cottage, an 1832 brick and stone house in Marquis Street, South Hobart, Tasmania, Australia. Daisy Cottage was originally built as a 9-room hotel by an Irish stonemason. He built an almost identical house right next door for himself, which has been empty the entire time we have lived in Daisy Cottage. Legend has it that he witnessed the stabbing murder of the local policeman and testified against the killer in court. The killer was sentenced to lashings, followed by hanging death, and apparently it is he who haunts the house. Strange things have happened, but only one of us is in the house. The first thing happened to Chris, my boyfriend. He arrived home from work one day and checked the mailbox for an important letter that he was expecting. He took it out of the mailbox, opened the front door, and headed upstairs to the bedroom to get changed. On the way, he started to open the letter. Once upstairs, he realized it was raining, so he put the partially open letter on the bed and went downstairs and out into the back courtyard to take the washing off the clothesline. Once he got back inside, he went back to open and read the letter, and it was not there. After about 30 minutes of searching, he called me out of frustration. I arrived home and helped him look for the letter, turning the house upside down. Eventually I said, "Are you sure you took it out of the letterbox? Maybe you should check." Sure enough, there it was, sitting in the letterbox, partially opened. Second strange thing happened 2 days ago. I was alone in the house, doing some painting. It was getting dark, so I turned on the hall, bathroom, dining room, and kitchen lights, and had not ventured upstairs at all. I finished, cleaned up, and started turning off all the lights, getting ready to leave, as we currently aren't staying there during the renovations. I got to the front door and realized that there were lights still on in the house. Every single light upstairs had been turned on. As I left, I noticed that there was a light on in the upstairs of the empty house next door. The one thing that really got me though, as I was looking towards that house, I noticed some kind of print, like a handprint there. When I say handprint, I mean a floating hand. It was very faded, and then it just disappeared. Well, I guess he needed some light in the house. Thanks for reading. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the compilation of Tuesday, or maybe I'll upload it on Monday, who knows. But whenever you're watching this, obviously it's either Tuesday or Monday. And guess what? This was pre-recorded. Yes, that's right. I'm on vacation, so I'm pre-recording this, obviously. So guys, please leave your comments so I can get to them when I can get to them. Because in the vacation world, when you're not near a computer 24/7, you can't even respond promptly, and I can't even talk. So even though I'm on vacation, even though I record this when I'm at home right now, but I'm going in the future, you'll still get to hear the mess-ups, the screw-ups in this outro, and it won't even matter, because then life will be complete. I don't know, guys. Yeah, seriously though, obviously by the time you're listening to this compilation, I'll be out on vacation, probably stringing some underwear together and trying to, be a man of epic proportions. So, not sure what I'm ever saying, but I guess I'm just really excited for my trip, and you guys are still going to get some videos. So I'm trying so hard to get a video out for you guys today for obviously the compilation right now. And Thursday, I'm going to be featuring so many people on my channel. Well, there's going to be 3 other narrators featured on my channel on this Thursday, obviously. And I don't even know what else to say other than the fact that you should check that out. Unfortunately, I may or may not appear. You'll find out. But guys, I'm still the mastermind behind the videos. They're still original, true ghost stories, supposedly anyway, that you have to check out and listen to. So don't miss that video on Thursday. But anyway, guys, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. You got this compilation to enjoy, so an hour-long festive atmosphere of phantom togetherness, and that's what we have for the vacation week that I am going to give you guys. Well, it's not really a vacation for you guys as much as it is for me, but that's beside the point. Guys, I gotta go. I'm probably swimming in the ocean right now, so please take the moment to acknowledge your peers and just love them as much as possible. I don't know what I'm saying anymore, guys. I'm going to cut it out before I sound even more ridiculously awkward. Bye. Love you guys. I'm just so excited. My bad.